no intention of getting an Ally X, but then it suddenly arrived at my door. A story for another day, but it's been 24 hours since it arrived, and there's a ton to talk about. Specifically, the redesigned chassis, the Armory Crate SE experience, and the insane battery life that makes the Ally X look like a great refinement to the original Ally. Specifically though, I want to talk about the changes you can actually feel right out of the box, as well as my experience using the Ally X for those first 24 hours, and whether or not I think it's an actual improvement over the original Ally. Starting off with the packaging. You're greeted with this new set of instructions that reminds you to plug in the Ally X prior to powering it on, because if you don't, it won't turn on. Below that is of course the Ally X, which immediately felt heavier and more dense than the original. This is a good thing though, because it makes the Ally X feel more premium and better built than the original Ally. Below that is going to be a compartment for the 65-watt USB-C charger, and of course in the lid of the box are your two kickstands. Asus was kind enough to include two kickstands this time in case you lose one, or in my case, your cat grabs it and drags it across the living room. First thing I immediately noticed when holding the Ally X was how much better it felt. Even though it's a bit heavier, the ergonomics feel much more comfortable than the original. If you remember the old Ally, it felt super flat and angled, but not the Ally X. This time around, the device feels much more rounded and more naturally fitting to your hands. The rear palm grips are deeper and more defined, making it fit in your hands much more akin to a Steam Deck or even a Legion Go. That being said, the Ally X still manages to be a more condensed device than both the Steam Deck and the Legion Go, and I love that. It maintains everything I loved about the original Ally, but improved it in all the right ways. And again, because it's a bit heavier, it gives off a more premium feeling and generally feels more solid than something like a Steam Deck, which makes sense because the Ally X is $800 despite coming with 1 terabyte of internal storage. But that's not all that changed. Some of the controls got a refresh too, starting with the thumbsticks. I absolutely love the thumbsticks on the original Ally, and Asus improved them on the Ally X by making the center a bit deeper but keeping the super nice grip on the outside. Hands down, still the best thumbsticks on a handheld. Then there's the D-pad. Now, I don't remember specifically disliking the old D-pad, but apparently Asus decided to mix it up, and this new one does feel better than the original. The face buttons are mostly unchanged, though they do feel a bit flatter on top while offering a bit more travel than the original. Now, I got a hot take about the triggers. I think they're worse than the original. These are a bit wider and feel like they have less travel overall. They also feel a little hollow and flat. A bit of a letdown because the triggers on the original Ally were so much better. Then you have the new rear buttons, which I'm sort of on the fence with for now. I like that they're a bit smaller, but they feel like they're further away, which requires me to change my grip in order to use them. We'll see in a few weeks if that changes. Up top, we find probably my favorite addition to the Ally X, a second USB-C port. Finally, no more XG mobile port. And honestly, I'm fine with that because this new USB-C port supports 40 gigabit per second speeds, aka USB 4, meaning it's fast enough for a third-party external GPU or for an external display with power delivery. No more having to choose between charging or plugging in an accessory. There's also a new vent for the display and a new micro SD card slot, which supposedly doesn't fry your SD card this time. I haven't yet put an SD card into it because I'm kind of scared too, but apparently they learned their lesson from the first time. And probably the strangest change was the power button. It's definitely an underrated change, but it feels much more solid, and the fingerprint reader is now recessed into the button, giving it a much more distinct feeling. With that out of the way, let's talk about Armory Crate SE. Overall, it feels the same as the original Armory Crate SE, but this newer version definitely feels more tidied up. I like the way Asus organized the game section now and how you can actually customize the look of your library. The command center is largely unchanged, but does have some new controls and some new power modes. Quiet mode is now 13 watts instead of 10 watts, and performance mode is 17 watts instead of 15 watts. This is likely due to the bigger battery, meaning we get just a bit more juice in those power modes. Turbo mode, however, is the same at 25 watts and 30 watts when plugged into the wall. You also have this new CPU boost toggle, which boosts the CPU for certain tasks, but beware, because not only does it suck back more overall power, it likely won't improve gaming performance. Friend and fellow YouTuber The Fox has a great video explaining all these power modes in much more detail, so if you're into that sort of thing, I'll link his video down below. Generally speaking, I've been playing games in performance mode. One thing I noticed, however, is that the system would actually draw more power than it was supposed to for a period of time before dropping to the selected level. I'd be playing Elden Ring on performance mode, which is supposed to only be 17 watts, but the system would be pulling over 20 watts for a few minutes before dropping to 17. This would lead to a boost in performance for for that brief period, but suddenly dropping back down in the middle of the game. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was something I noticed in both quiet and performance modes. Probably the best thing I noticed though was that quiet mode is actually usable for gaming now, especially for indies. I'm not going to harp on performance in this video, but overall, the Ally X felt a lot like the Ally in most titles, especially given it's using the same Z1 Extreme chip and 1080p display. It does have more and faster RAM, but we'll have to see if it actually makes a difference. Stay tuned for the full review if you want to see more performance numbers. The cooling system also got some changes. I was shocked how quiet the Ally X was, even while gaming. The new fans really do improve noise and even make the device feel cool to the touch when using it. The new vent for the display at the top also helps keep the front of the device cooler as well. And last, but not least, the battery. By now you probably heard the Ally X has double the battery of the original Ally, and while that normally doesn't always mean double the battery life, in the case of the Ally X, it definitely does, and then some. Even though I've only used it for a day, the Ally X is the first Windows handheld I feel can rival the Steam Deck in battery performance. Normally, I have to plug in after an hour of gaming, but with the Ally X, I felt like I could comfortably play Elden Ring on performance mode for more than 2 hours before even checking the battery. Something I can't say about any of my other handhelds. This is definitely the biggest change I felt with the Ally X. In a world where cramming in a bigger battery usually means thicker, heavier devices, Asus managed to squeeze in this 80 watt-hour battery into the X without making it too heavy or too thick and unwieldy. Instead, they leveraged it by adding more palm grip, making the X feel more solid. It's by far the best thing about the Ally X and is reason enough to upgrade from the original if you have battery anxiety or find yourself constantly reaching for the charger. But those are all the changes to the Ally X that you can actually feel right out of the box. So, is it an actual improvement over the original Ally? Well, you tell me. And if you're still not sure, make sure to get subscribed because I plan to do a full review of the Ally X and pit it up against not only the original Ally, but the OLED Steam Deck.